Hi everyone, welcome to Money and Me podcast by the Coin Republic. I'm your host Varuni, and today I have with me yet another super amazing guest from the Web3 crypto blockchain space who's here to decode all about Eunice and, of course, herself. Hi Yi, it's lovely to have you on our show today. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to have this discussion with you today. Very much look forward to.
Absolutely, likewise. And I'm excited to hear about all the amazing things that you guys are doing at Eunice. As well as, of course, I think we should begin with your journey, how it has been in the Web3 space. And I often like to call this space a rabbit hole. So I think I'd like to ask you, how did you stumble upon this rabbit hole? And you're still in it. So
Yeah,
what's been the motivation? What's been the storyline?
absolutely. Yeah, I'm still very deep in the rabbit hole right now, and my journey began from the 2017, 2018. So I was part of a venture capital that who started to look into the digital asset space. I have done a fair amount of research during that time. I didn't believe DeFi, and that time I didn't like my little brain couldn't comprehend it, and I was proven wrong. We made some investments; some of them have gone really well, but most of them actually didn't survive the ICO bubble. I mean, most of project that time didn't survive the cycle anyway. And it was really interesting to me because I come from a fintech background. That's where I started, and as you very much aware of, a lot of the people from the industry came from either fintech or traditional finance, and as we see this, the big movement of finance move on chain. So. Um, uh, my journey really began from that time of getting the taste of the digital asset. But I think my personal pain point around that time, while trying to stay on top of what's going on, especially a lot of the high risk events happened towards the end of the cycle before the bear market come in. Like that was my personal pain point around like being a VC. You are a one man band. You're trying to do a lot of things by yourself. I was like, oh, there's so much going on in this universe. Like, how do you really sort of like develop a way to understand and stay on top in a systematic approach? If something sort of sit behind me as a almost like plant a seed in my mind, but it's never, sort of come into a product shape, which is great. I think at that time the market wasn't ready. And after that, I spent 3 years building a fintech called FreeUp. It's an early wage access platform. We managed to sold it to a bank. And after that, I was like having my second baby, and I was bored. I was busy physically, but I was like, oh, what I'm going to do next? That's my second startup. I just got really fascinated about what's going on in the digital asset space. Again, I've spoken to friends who I've got to know years ago from VC time, and I always love being in a new industry where a lot of things going on, and it have been proven very true. So I raised a pre-seed round for Eunice in the perfect timing, which is 2022. As soon as we have closed the round, the market has tanked to a bottom in August, and for the reason that everybody has very much aware of, just a series of black swan events. So the team have to go back to the drawing board essentially, and Eunice was born from them. Yeah.
Wow, what a beautiful journey it has been. And um, other than what you do, you're also a mother. I am still grasping how you're juggling all of this together, your professional life, being an amazing mother, I'm sure, and Eunice. So if I have to talk about Eunice, what is the core idea? What's the mission and vision behind the firm, and how have you guys grown from when you started?
Yeah. So, I think there's one thing have never been changed since the Eunice journey from the day one is really the mission of bringing the transparency to digital asset industry. I think this is a concept very important to me personally because I see digital asset and crypto in general have like two fundamental risks. One is financial risk, which is sort of like a risk being actually quite well understood by because of trading. So I think financial risk is one main part, which has been quite well understood since trading is the main use case within the crypto industry. But there are another big part of the risk is still nowadays being very well understood as counterparty risk. And the counterparty risk can be solved in many different ways. We have players such as custodian platform like our clients, corporate Zodiac markets. They solve it with one approach. And then the way that Eunice come in and solve it is really to bring this information symmetry gap as close as possible. So I think there's many ways you can do it. You could look into, what information right now that institutional are having versus information the project having versus the retail are having. There's a huge gap there. And also like how we standardize the information that right now is definitely not standardized. And people may argue if there a need to standardize that. But our belief is that with the transparency, with the standardization, this is the only path digital asset is going to becoming the mainstream asset class for the traditional finance industry. And that is why there are so many organizations such as S&P, Moody's, Bloomberg, they work on this kind of standardization of information. So institutional investors and regulator could comprehend it and bring regulatory clarity as well as the mandate that endowment fund and pension when they could move into this industry. So this is our vision, and this is where we wanted to play an important building block for the industry in the next 5 to 10 years time. And we're just taking a baby step right now.
Absolutely. You mentioned that there were some gaps in the space that you saw, and of course, your team and Eunice were quick to sort of materialize on those gaps. If you can talk a little bit about those gaps in this space regarding information, regarding, of course, standardization of information, and are they still in picture? How is Eunice playing a role in sort of bridging those gaps, and how is the industry at large dealing with these gaps that we have in this space?
Yeah, I think industry in the past several years have started to aware of those gaps, which is obviously I think a great news and great progress. So one, I think a vivid example of the gaps between the institution have retail is that this is practice we actually involved a lot. It's called a listing on the centralized exchange, where the exchange is actually conduct a thorough analysis. I mean, most of them conduct a quite thorough analysis, some exchange maybe not. And then they obviously offer this digital asset to the retail on the platform. And the process we've been seeing is extremely comprehensive. Some of the best practice we've been seeing on the NODFS regulated entity particularly. Towards another spectrum, there's actually quite a lot of you say a bit of insider trading, insider, sort of practice with the listing team. We also see another extreme, which regulators are very concerned of, and it can be called a market abuse. And but for retail, the information available for them is very scattered. And think about how you discover a digital asset that's being listed on the new exchange. It's like you're trying to look at what's going on Twitter, and you might be able to have a quick look on the on-chain platform if you subscribe to some of them, and if you know what you are looking at, and you're trying to figure out, okay, they seem to have a white paper check on website seems legit. I mean, largely, but we also have been seeing, I think a symmetry there when exchange are holding a lot of information and to what extent they disclose to people who are trading. And the second, when they monitor the risks, how much they actually do it, how much they actually disclose to the users on the platforms also vary so much. And I think Eunice come in to play a role that we wanted to use the best quality data and a systematic way of monitoring to make sure that the participant in the market, if they're willing to, they have easy access to those information. And we wanted to make sure on this moment, this information is accurate as possible, is being as monitored as closely as possible. So I mean, as you know, crypto is involved so quickly 24/7. So the price can drop over just 5 seconds. 90% of in some cases last year, and happy to go into the details of rug and pulls. But I think in general, we are building this infrastructure to enable, no matter if exchange come to us saying like we want to do better monitoring, or a fund, or a custodian liquidity provider, and we currently, a very important product I'm building, like with the team, is the product actually for retail. So a retail would come in and have ability to access information that an institution would also have, and the level of depth, a level of accuracy, and the timely. I think this is something that the team has been working really hard in the past 2 years and a half.
Right. Are there any key insights that maybe you can share in terms of the malicious and fraudulent activity that you guys
Yeah,
at Eunice monitor? And of course, I'm sure there are a lot of red flags when it comes to the crypto space. We hear about him, and as a news agency, we report about these issues day in and day night. But
yeah.
can you give us a deeper insight into these red flags of this space, and how do you guys sort of monitor these?
Yeah, so we do monitoring through two ways. We do on-chain monitoring, we do off-chain monitoring. So on off-chain monitoring, we're capturing data from social media. We capture, I mean, in X, Twitter, we're capturing from Telegram group channel, and news obviously is a big channel. And we're capturing regulatory updates. So it's quite a broad range of information we gathered. It's a lot of work the AI is running around doing deduplication and translation. For example, there are like the adverse news have been captured that are written in Japanese on particular token that have been sort of like pushed to our client side, and otherwise it would take them ages to actually discover the existence and then translate that piece. So I think we've been very lucky to build Eunice in a time that agent is now pretty mature and able to use to in production. So that's our off-chain monitoring, and then we go through a big labeling pipeline. We differentiate into like keyman risk, technology hack, exploit. I mean, there's actually plenty of the hack we capture from the Twitter, because if you're monitoring all securities, companies, their Twitter, you already capture quite a lot of information by their itself, and then. Obviously, on-chain data is very important to us too. So we're capturing things like blacklist, like smart contract function monitoring, and then we also capture anomaly detection, like suddenly spike of transaction on the DEX and a sudden drop of the price. Those type of information as well, which compensate to, which is helping our clients to analysis and go deep into the high risk events and conduct their own analysis around it. Yeah, I can have very happy to give you some details, but I think on that part, the institution do have slightly different needs than retail from our perspective. Like, for example, institution really use our tool for compliance and legal and risk monitoring in general. So a lot of things such as regulatory enforcement is really important. Like, for example, it won't happen this year, but last year, SEC have mentioned, below 20 crypto assets. I think we think that's security. I mean, they think security at that time. And so our clients would, really want it to, this goes into the risk monitoring like process. And so just especially they have the US operation, it's very important for them. Or a particular asset being put into a green list of a certain jurisdiction. Like we have several regulators currently use this green list approach when it comes to regulate the assets. So a lot of institutional clients put quite heavy weight on that. And then when it comes to retail, the focus a lot there is really on the very early stage token, because there are not a lot of information available around them. So there's only just two type of information, fundamentally. One, the social media, X. But we all know that that can be faked. That you can buy bots and sort of like boost your traction and looks a lot of going on, but who knows, there's a pump and dump, and also on-chain data is very important reflection of what's really going on, and both none of them or both combined can be the magic wand saying there's no issue with this project and it's perfect, just go in and it's all good. But it's a good indicator. And I think based on our experience last year to be able to build a time series around how things been developing, like how centralization on the on-chain. We develop a lot of complicated metrics around it. Happy to go into the details. But in generally, we think that's the best approach we can do nowadays with the very emerging assets.
How has the advent of AI helped or not helped Eunice and your clients? And how are you guys trying to incorporate AI into the entire structure? If you can talk a little bit more about that, has it been a market or maker for you guys?
Yeah, I think without AI, our solution is not possible. It's as simple as that because crypto is 24/7, and if you keep running for 365 days a year, um, to deploy a global team manually, sort of like doing all the work I've described, like you go in around and collect the data, you know where to collect, and you have a risk framework enable you to do filtering and do it like really quickly and non-stop. We will have to rely AI and technology to make this a realization. And we also have some the more traditional research firm, they have hired quite big analyst team to conduct quarterly report on some of the assets. We do think that those are super important. I think in the past 10 years, been really building a very, like a golden bar for what research look like. But I generally think the next 5 years, crypto will need a very different approach than one how traditional finance has been monitored, and second, a very AI first strategy when it comes to really, like nowadays, there are bots who are interact with smart contract real time on chain, and there are bots who's been, twittering 24/7 about the crypto project on the Twitter. So you really, when it comes to risk management, you also need to deploy technology that will never sleep and also highly accurate. I think this is where we come in because why wouldn't you use a general model for that? Why wouldn't you just throw a ChatGPT over? I mean, we do use a general model as a foundation we have, but I think the two very, very important parts we work really hard to build into our platform. One is the data we've been collecting, the knowledge base. It's been very, very extensively cleaned by human analysts as well as our clients. So those data about the crypto project, I can't say it's correct forever, but we can say at this moment is highest quality in the world because it's used by legal purpose, compliance purpose by some of the biggest institutions. So and we have a automatic pipeline to keep this information accurate in real time. This is one. And the second, sometimes in many cases we see vertical AI solution. The magic is not coming to like you have more client relationships. Sometimes that's the case, but we generally think the magic comes to what questions to ask, and you are able to break down these questions to 5 super effective prompts, able to really fit into the work you're trying to achieve. And this is what we work really, really hard, because if someone come in and ask a question about, tell me, how centralized this project is. I mean, what centralized mean? It can mean so many layers. Means the centralization on chain, the centralization on the community, the centralization on the technology stack, and the nodes. So, but how do you able to break down a vague question into very effective prompts? And that is involve very heavy domain knowledge baked into your entire product as well as your process. So that's where we've been focused. One is the data, and second is baking the domain knowledge into the prompts.
Absolutely. So, with the advent of AI, of course, like you mentioned, Eunice wouldn't have been possible in there. It's definitely been a market maker for a lot of firms, but we saw a new set of challenges that retailers or even institutions were facing, like, let's say, AI driven scams or hacks, so on and so forth. And of course, it was a power tool for the bad actors as well. Now, with Eunice's goal around sustainable development and the sustainable development goals, how are you guys trying to sort of balance the ill effects of AI with the sustainability angle that you guys have? If you can talk a little bit about that, tying the two of these together, that would be great.
Yeah, sounds good. I still a firm believer that AI will be, a mostly effective assistant of human, especially when it comes to relatively complex task. I know there's already a big wave of AI agent come on train last year, and it's very autonomously have its own brain, have its own wallet address. But I think what it comes to risk management and compliance and legal, humans still play a very important role because humans are writing these rules. Those rules are set by regulators in the mission of consumer protection, and those organizations are run by human. So how we balance this within Eunice is we still apply a human in loop process. It's still very much driven by a human when it comes to risk framework, like when it comes to what is the important metrics you need to keep involved in the market. We have a really good research team who is doing that. I mean, basically understanding, oh, this is a new trick now going on in the new emerging token space. So let's look into how we are able to develop a methodology to sort of like detect more red flags based on particular newly developed tricks. I think it's just like a lot of the new things we've been seeing, the new strategy of, for example, rag and pull, and then last year we've been building the tools such as token whispery. It's very much focused on empowering retail to look into early stage meme coins and understand what's going on. And it's a combination of the five on-chain metrics from large holders to how many fresh wallet address within this particular meme coins, and also the holding time ratio and also decentralization ratio. So being like basically combine a lot of complicated, relatively complex concept into one single metric that help retail be able to track what's going on there. We don't have a commercial model for that currently. We're just doing that for understanding the market, understanding how we can potentially help retail in 2025. And we have been building also a Twitter bot detector. And we actually have, writing a very comprehensive essay about, the methodology, how you scrape like the first 10K follower of a particular account, and what's the factor you need to consider. Like we have 27 factors you need to consider when you decide whether this is a bot or non-bot follower. I mean, nowadays, whether it's a bot or not, maybe it doesn't matter so much anymore. But back last year, we've been building the tools that we hope is going to bring essentially more sustainability practice in the industry going forward. A lot of them are not like for commercial reason. We not commercialize them. We just like building them because we think it's a very interesting and worthwhile topics.
Interesting. You also mentioned about giving the power back to retailers, back to ordinary users or beginners rather. If you can give, let's say, a few pieces of advice to people who are new to the space or are just joining and are interested in researching things that they can do to make their research better and to not fall for scams or, I mean, hacks, so on and so forth. Anything that comes off the top of your mind.
Yeah, that's really like not an easy one. So I sometimes get, I buy token. I try to follow the strategy we have with token whispery, and you see some of the on-chain metrics just dropped massively. We can give you some examples. Like there's a token called Monet. Last year, it's sort of like I have a facade of look quite legitimate. It was being, sort of like positioned as the first Monet native AI, which is on the a layer one blockchain. It's like first AI agent on a layer one blockchain, but it's actually a flow rock. So it was launched back in 2020, 24 in Q1, and obviously, we've been tracking the on-chain data quite closely, and you will see that it's really interesting that there's a lot of trades like over time being made by fresh address. It's like there's a lot of newly created address being sort of like trading that, and also there's like so just that you don't see big holders, like the holders with like big balance are holding this asset. So there's like some red flags will start to pick up after a while, and I think those metrics is not super easy to be like picked up by a retail when it comes to a very new token that they're looking to, because the concept is very legit. If AI agent is hot, and this L1 blockchain itself, Monet, is also legit. And I think the probably my only 2 cents to give people really come to an industry that is that just one, if you are serious and this is a gambling field when it comes to a meme coin, you need to prepare to lose and don't sort of like put more money than what you are afford to lose. I think it's just very much the same as going to a casino if you are trading a meme. But if you are like looking into a real crypto use case, there's actually a lot of like research, I would say, you would want it to do before making the move. And I think it's also very fun to do the research, because when you think about learning crypto, there's a lot of the fundamental that one could pick it up. Like, for example, are you buying the DeFi as a whole, as a thesis? Like, where do you see the DeFi is going? Like, why are you buying DeFi? And what's your view on, for example, the tokens that currently sort of like working a very different utility, like a chain link. So I think people will want to build a bit of their own thesis before they come into a place, if they are buying sort of like more traditional type of crypto assets. But I think you will see also more product come into the market. I think this is very much like going to a traditional finance market. You see ETP, ETF now come to the market, which allow you to have increasingly choices on exposure, not just Bitcoin and ETH. You have Solana, you have Dodge. So I think that is also getting really interesting, that if I don't understand the equity or stocks, I just go on buy ETF. I buy a basket of ETF, and then I trust whoever sort of like currently manage that ETF for me. And so I think there's different approach all the way from you just wanted to get exposure to this asset class. In the middle is that you actually have take an interest. You wanted to do your trade, but you wanted to invest into those assets who actually have a utility and generate revenue, and then potentially at some point have a PE ratio you could look into, which is very rare in crypto space. It exists, but yeah, or you just really take this as a gambling place and trading on a meme coin. I think people wanted to really think through what you want to do before jump into this space. But I think it is very exciting. It's like no boring day, and a lot to keep up on, a lot to research before.
Absolutely. You rightly
Yeah.
mentioned that there is, in fact, a lot to keep up on. And I think when we talk about keeping up, I think one thing that is really difficult to keep up with is regulations, and different geographies, different regulations. And of course, the regulatory landscape has evolved quite a bit in the last couple of years. We have, like you rightly mentioned, ETFs and ATPs, which give fair exposure to beginners and noobs in this space. But even so, as a firm working closely with retailers and institutions from, of course, across the world, is it difficult to keep track of the different geographies and the different regulatory landscapes across these geographies? And also, while you're addressing that here, I would also love to know what your views on the
Mm.
current landscape,
Yeah.
the regulatory landscape is.
Yeah, we actually work quite close with regulators too. For example, we are a data provider to FCA Sandbox, and we have, in the last 12 months' time, we have demoed and also offered our platform to 14 regulators globally, some US one, and also ESMA, FCA, Middle East. I think the reason why regulators take a strong interest into Eunice because they have a very strong mandate of consumer protection in the upcoming crypto regime, which has been one of the top priorities since what happened with FTX and 3 Arrow. So yeah, usually you see, there are some similarity across different crypto regime. You see all the regulators are writing the rules on one crypto asset admission requirement. This is very much directly related to us, and we are inputting into many of the regulators' current regime as well, especially ESMA and FCA. Another part is market abuse, and when it comes to a rug pull, those things are also falling into the market abuse region. So we sort of like currently relevant to both of them. And I think that you see some similarity on that part. But also, I think one thing for our institutional clients is particularly hard is that it's also like each jurisdiction has slightly different approach when it comes to a regulation. And there is no universal crypto taxonomy, for example. And it can create a lot of complexity for the global players. So one example I can give to you is that most of our clients actually have a very centralized listing team based in their headquarters. And usually it's a team from 5 people to 40 people. But in the past 12 months' time, the regional requirement becoming a huge demand because, for example, in UK, that what you need to disclose on your listing is slightly different with asthma. It's not massively, and those two probably the closest. But if you are also have a license in, for example, under VARA or in Hong Kong or in Australia and US, you do a work called token classification quite differently. And so the regional requirement on being state compliant and being able to classify a token not a financial security meet regional requirement. In many cases, we see that becoming a quite tension with a centralized listing team. And I think this is just a small sort of snapshot of what you see nowadays happen within crypto industry, that all this big institution had a centralized risk compliance legal function previously. But now they are got really stretched on regional requirement. So I think the interest tension there is that you see on one side those big crypto exchange now get into a shape of almost being regulated as an investment bank because you carry the activities being carried as a traditional finance trading platform, so you've been regulated that way. So more regulation come to you, but at the same time crypto is so like global. So from day one, you almost started with global native, and a lot of them sort of like back down in the last several years. And then, but nowadays, you kind of have been spread very thin with your already quite thin back office. So our view is that there's actually a big I think a wave of opportunity come to a place on the players in compliance, legal, and risk for the digital asset, because you just need to make sure you have a tech infrastructure and you have a manpower to make sure you're not just compliant with your main regulated jurisdiction, but wherever you have customer, you serve them as well. So I think this is just maybe one important touch point to share on regulator. And I think in the last cycle, you see a lot of regulatory arbitrage, which still happening, but less and less. For example, in EU, if you don't have a MiCA white paper, or you don't have a license, there's a date you just wouldn't be able to keep operational. And I think this is happening in the UK, and it's also US by middle of this year. We're going to have a much clearer picture on what's the crypto regime over there, and I'm very also delighted there's some final clarity come to a very important market. So I think you will see less regulatory arbitrage can happen. And I mean, if they still do it, which is like means their market is going to shrink. And obviously, there's going to be evolving standard as well. Regulators themselves are learning. We have met some really impressive regulators. And to call them out, like for example, New York DFS, they have a massive crypto research team, and they are incredibly sophisticated when it comes to on-chain research, when it comes to stay on the trend of what's going on in the crypto industry. So there's CFTC, and we've been meeting with FCA almost on a monthly basis. And we're also doing a lot of research about the digital asset. So I'm very, very pleased to see the regulators are also coming to a way understanding the industry. And I think I'm seeing more and more the industry now also goes into the regulator, which is also, I think, is a great sign because you finally go into the mainstream. I think there's still resistance. But I think there's just one recently, interesting anecdote to share that I chat with a founder of a DeFi protocol. I'm not going to name it. Just like, there are sandbox of those regulators. What's your view on that? And she was mentioning a point which I thought was really interesting. And she felt like as a DeFi protocol, they've been a little bit missing out the opportunity to work with institutions because they are not licensed. And she's actually really embracing the opportunity to be able to, if she can find a clear path to be licensed and to be able to work with institution, that's something she clearly see as a differentiator with what she's currently working on. So I'm just quite surprised. This is a conversation I have quite lately, and I think this is also signaling of a mindset shift. Not say everybody's moving to that direction, but I think there are some of them are sort of like meeting in the middle, which I think is going to continue happening in the next 5 years in the industry. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, definitely a lot to look forward to this year, not just in terms of regulations, but also just how the market progresses, price action, as well as development of different projects. I think it's going to be an interesting time to be living in, especially in the Web3 crypto space. So, I think I'll wrap up with my final question, which would be, what are your top three expectations from this year in terms of development or price action or regulation, whatever? Feel free to cover all the different sectors, and as well give us a roadmap maybe for Eunice, and what are going to be your 2025 year goals.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I mean, start with a big question. So again, I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't do Bitcoin price prediction. But I think, I mean, I'm very optimistic about what's going on in 2025. I think, as I said, I think, we really felt like there's a part of that play a very important role in the digital asset space, which is our regulators are most centralized entity, but they are currently writing the rules on how the industry is going to be, shaped and regulated in the next decade. So they are very important players. And I think finally we see, like in the last 12 months, the clarity there is just really overwhelmed. Like, for example, Mika white paper, I think this is a great step. Even though people like will argue, whether those requirements are the best, and can you address some of them? But I think ESMA has a small team. They have been working really hard on getting out this templates of 150 questions and saying like, okay, those are standardized disclosure requirements we have for the project. I think this is a baby steps. It's a very important steps to bring us to a universe. Some of the digital asset is going to be treated as financial asset, and we really wanted to see a world that the big institution will embrace it, see it as part of their asset strategy. And I think there's many things need to be happened from different participants on like make this vision a reality. But I think in 2025, I think the market is going to probably not going to go crazy as we already in this like lukewarm temperature. And I think real world asset on-chain finance is going to be a very big theme. I think it's very exciting that we see in the US the banks now allowed to hold in the crypto, allow a custodian. I think this is going to drive more institutional adoption. I think this is going to anchor the next 12 months narrative a lot. And I think in the past 12 months, people were arguing about whether the meme coin can really support the narrative within crypto space. And I'm also have doubt around that. I think meme coin is very interesting. It brings community together. But I think for the industry move really forward and sort of have the next big technology, sort of like driven cycle, there need to be a quite solid technology behind it. And some people think this is AI, we're still, waiting this to come to fruitfulization. And then this is another part, we're waiting for a technology. I think the last cycle thing, still was saying DeFi, and we're still waiting for that. If that, is that DeepIn, is that AI, we're still waiting that to come. And I think also just in general, we are very much really, still very much focused on the part that we could enable institution to look into digital assets in a way that they could trust, and they could have a peace in mind that with this particular asset, whether this is a use case of listing, lending, investing, we wanted to bring the information as timely as possible, as clearly as possible, and also make sure this is systematically being captured. And this is what we're trying to do. And also on the side, like this is more about my own personal mission. I wanted to create a product that which we will allow retail to have at least a similar access to the information when they come into a space as well. So we're still like cooking this product. So I don't have a picture, like a screenshot I can share with you yet. But I'm personally very, very excited about the retail part. And by the way, I just want to say that the name of Eunice actually comes from a female scientist called Eunice Foote, and she is a mother of two. And she discovered CO2 would cause a global warming, but she wasn't allowed to give her presentation in an academic conference because that was 100 years ago. So I was quite inspired by that, because I think, I'm generally believe finance on chain, and in the future there's going to be a significant chunk of traditional finance move into the blockchain space, and have a more trustless approach that we could trade with each other and transact and interact in this financial ecosystem. So with that future in mind, I really think sustainability is something that I wanted to put my efforts on, and that's where I felt very important from a personal mission perspective. I spend my days and night and build this thing and hopefully do some good about it for the industry.
Wow, that was amazing and very well put together. I'm sure that I I thoroughly enjoyed this interview, and I'm sure that our users would too. And some amazing points were made, Yi, especially around regulations, the meme coin cycle, what will happen, how will the market progress, as well as you guys working closely with regulators, and of course, the larger narrative being that bringing power back to retailers, because that is what will lead to the true growth of this space. And most importantly, what I loved was the sustainability angle, and how you guys will be still hyper focused on sustainability and not just growth. So kudos to that, and kudos to you and the team for bringing in such an amazing product into the market.
Thank you so
Yeah, and
much.
it was lovely talking to you, Ye, and you're truly the embodiment, I should say, of Eunice, the scientist, with the two kids and the sustainability agenda. So I wish you
As
all
well.
the right. So you're truly the embodiment of the scientist, and we hope that you guys are able to do all the amazing things that are in plans for not just this year, but uh, yeah, the end of time. And
Absolutely. Yeah, I really enjoy the conversation, and there's a lot of interesting topics we've been able to cover in the last 45 minutes. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thanks for
it's
having me.